The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Meridian Logistics as Colonel Robert "Hawk" Hawkins stepped out of his weathered Ford F-150 at 58. His silver hair was neatly combed, his shoulders still carried the military bearing that 26 years in the Air Force had ingrained in him, and his steel-gray eyes reflected decades of discipline and determination. The crisp October air in Denver, Colorado, carried the scent of autumn leaves and the distant hum of commercial aircraft overhead, sounds that had always been music to his ears. Rob adjusted his tie one last time before walking toward the glass entrance of the freight management company. After retiring from active duty 6 months ago, he'd spent countless hours searching for civilian work, facing rejection after rejection. Companies seemed impressed by his resume on paper, but something always changed during face-to-face meetings. Today felt different, though. Meridian Logistics needed an operations coordinator. His military logistics experience seemed like a perfect fit. The reception area buzzed with activity. Young employees rushed past carrying tablets and coffee cups, their conversations filled with shipping schedules and delivery deadlines. Rob approached the front desk, where a 20-something receptionist looked up with a professional smile. "Colonel Hawkins, for my 10 a.m. appointment with Mr. Bradley," he announced, his voice carrying the clear, authoritative tone that had commanded respect in military briefings. "Of course, Mr. Bradley will be right with you. Please have a seat." Rob settled into a leather chair. He observed the operation around him. Efficient, fast-paced, demanding split-second decisions, exactly the kind of environment where his military experience would shine. He'd managed supply chains across 3 combat zones, coordinated emergency evacuations under fire, and led teams through impossible deadlines. This civilian job should be straightforward by comparison. "Colonel Hawkins," a voice interrupted. His thoughts. Rob stood to see a man in his early 30s approaching expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and the confident swagger of someone who'd climbed the corporate ladder quickly. This had to be Marcus Bradley, the operations manager he'd spoken with over the phone. "Mr. Bradley, pleasure to meet you in person." Rob extended his hand with a firm handshake. Marcus's grip was weak, distracted. His eyes scanned Rob from head to toe with an expression that shifted from professional courtesy to something else, doubt, maybe even dismissal. "Right, well, let's head to my office," Marcus said, his tone notably cooler than during their phone conversation. They walked through the bustling office space, past rows of desks where young professionals worked intensely. On multiple monitors, Rob noticed the energy, the urgency. It reminded him of mission control during critical operations. Felt energized just being in this environment. Marcus's office was a shrine to modern success. Glass desk, multiple monitors, motivational quotes about disrupting industries framed on the walls. As they sat down, Marcus pulled out Rob's printed resume and glanced at it with what seemed like reluctance. "So, Colonel, or should I say Mr. Hawkins now?" Marcus began, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. "Have to be honest with you. After our phone call, I did some research, and I'm having second thoughts about this position." Rob's posture remained straight, his expression calm but alert. "I'd like to hear your concerns, Mr. Bradley." "Well, it's just that," Marcus gestured vaguely toward Rob. "This is a high-energy, fast-paced environment. We're dealing with cutting-edge logistics software, real-time tracking systems, and frankly, a younger demographic. Our team works 12-hour days, pulls all-nighters when needed, and adapts to new technology constantly." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rob felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in countless other interviews where his age became the elephant in the room. "Mr. Bradley, my experience includes, I'm sure you've had a distinguished military career," Marcus interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "But that was a different world, wasn't it? Different pace, different technology. This isn't about flying planes or whatever it is you did. This is about modern business, and honestly," he paused, looking Rob up and down again, "I'm just not sure someone your age can keep up with what we need here." The silence that followed was deafening. Around them, the office continued its frenetic pace, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, young voices discussing deadlines and logistics. But in this glass-walled office, Time seemed suspended as two generations of American workers faced off across a chasm of assumptions and prejudice. Rob's hands remained steady on his lap, but inside, decades of suppressed frustration began to simmer. How many times had he heard variations of this same speech? How many employers had looked at his birth date and seen limitation instead of experience? How many had dismissed 26 years of military service as irrelevant to the modern world? Mr. Bradley, Rob finally spoke. His voice controlled but carrying an edge that made Marcus shift uncomfortably in his chair. I think there might be some misunderstandings about what my military service actually entailed. Marcus glanced at his watch impatiently. Look, I appreciate your service. I really do. My grandfather was in World War II, but this is 2024, and we need people who can adapt to different technology. Rob interrupted quietly. Different pace? Something in Rob's tone made Marcus's pause. The older man's gray eyes had sharpened, and there was a stillness about him that suggested depths Marcus hadn't considered. Tell me, Mr. Bradley, Rob continued, what's the most stressful situation you've faced in this office? A missed deadline? A system crash? A difficult client? Marcus straightened defensively. He handled millions of dollars in freight movement every day. The pressure is intense. Rob nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a weathered leather portfolio. I'd like to show you something if you don't mind. Something that might give you a better understanding of the kind of pace and pressure I'm accustomed to. As he unfolded the portfolio on Marcus's glass desk, the afternoon sun streaming through the office windows illuminated pages of official documents, commendations, and flight records that told a story Marcus Bradley was completely unprepared to hear. The leather portfolio opened like a window into a world Marcus Bradley had never imagined. The first document that caught his eye was an official Air Force commendation, its gold seal gleaming under the office fluorescent lights. But it was the photograph attached that made him pause, a younger version of the man sitting across from him, standing beside an F-16 Fighting Falcon, wearing a flight suit and the unmistakable confidence of someone who belonged in the cockpit of one of the world's most advanced fighter jets. You were a pilot? Marcus asked, his dismissive tone faltering for the first time. Fighter pilot, Rob corrected quietly, his fingers moving to the next document in the portfolio. F-16s primarily, though I also flew the F-15 Eagle and had some time in the F-2 Raptor during its early deployment phase. Marcus stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the silver-haired man before him with the image of the young aviator standing confidently beside a multi-million-dollar war machine. The mathematics of it slowly dawned on him. This wasn't just any veteran. This was someone who had been trusted with some of the most sophisticated technology the United States military possessed. This is my flight record, Rob continued, turning to a thick section of meticulously maintained logs. Every mission, every flight hour, every combat sortie from 1988 to 2024, 26 years of active duty. The pages were filled with entries that read like something from a military thriller. Marcus saw coordinates for places he recognized from news reports: Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, the Persian Gulf. Each entry was accompanied by mission details, aircraft specifications, and outcomes. But it was the sheer volume that overwhelmed him. Page after page of flights, thousands of hours in the air, hundreds of combat missions. Operation Desert Storm, 1991, Rob said, pointing to a section of the log. 42 combat sorties in 60 days. Flying air-to-ground missions against heavily defended targets. The average mission lasted 4 to 6 hours, often in radio silence, navigating by instruments while enemy surface-to-air missiles tracked our every movement. Marcus found himself leaning forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by reluctant fascination. In 1999, during the Kosovo conflict, I flew night missions over the Balkans. Precision strikes requiring split-second timing and absolute accuracy. One miscalculation, one moment of hesitation, and either civilian casualties occurred, or we failed to neutralize threats that could cost Allied ground forces their lives. Rob turned another page, revealing mission reports from Afghanistan. 2002. 2004, close air support missions in Afghanistan. Do you know what that means, Mr. Bradley? Marcus shook his head, no longer pretending to understand. It means American soldiers on the ground, surrounded by enemy forces, radioing for immediate air support. When they made that call, they were depending on me to arrive at exact coordinates, identify targets within meters of friendly forces, and deliver ordnance with surgical precision. The margin for error was zero. The time pressure was measured in seconds, not hours or days. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting different shadows across the office. Around them, the Meridian logistics team continued their work, unaware that their manager was receiving an education in what real pressure looked like. Here's a mission from 2003, Rob continued, his finger tracing across a detailed flight log. Emergency medical evacuation in Iraq, convoy hit by an IED, multiple casualties, hostile forces in the area. I had to provide air cover for the medical helicopter while it extracted wounded soldiers. The weather was deteriorating, visibility was dropping, and enemy forces were trying to prevent the evacuation. Marcus stared at the technical details logged in Rob's precise handwriting fuel consumption calculations. Weapon system status, radio frequencies, weather conditions, all recorded in real time during life-and-death situations. You mentioned, Rob said, looking up from the portfolio. Let me tell you about the systems I operated. The F-16's avionics suite includes radar systems that can track multiple targets simultaneously, navigation computers that calculate intercept courses in real time, weapon systems that require constant monitoring and adjustment, and communication, systems that manage multiple radio frequencies while maintaining formation with other aircraft. He turned to another section showing technical certifications and training records. Every 6 months, we underwent intensive recertification on new systems, updated software, modified procedures. The Air Force doesn't retire outdated technology. Mr. Bradley, it constantly upgrades and adapts. I've operated systems that civilian companies won't see for another decade. Marcus's expensive suit suddenly felt less impressive as he looked at documentation of a career spent mastering technology that made his logistics software seem elementary by comparison. You asked about keeping up with a fast pace? Rob continued. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, we sometimes flew 3 missions in a single day. Launch at dawn for ground support, land for refueling and rearming, launch again for reconnaissance. Then a third mission, providing combat air patrol after sunset. Each mission required complete mental reset, new briefings, different objectives, updated intelligence. The flight logs showed this relentless pace maintained not for days or weeks, but for months at a time, mission after mission, each one documented with the same meticulous precision. Adapting to new technology? Rob smiled for the first time since entering the office. In 2018, I was selected to help introduce drone integration protocols, Amanda. Fighters working in coordination with unmanned aerial vehicles. Completely new operational concepts, requiring us to relearn fundamental aspects of combat aviation we'd been practicing for decades. Marcus realized he was holding his breath. Every assumption he'd made about this man was crumbling under the weight of evidence spread across his desk. Mr. Bradley, you mentioned working 12-hour days. During my deployment in Afghanistan, I regularly worked 18-hour days for weeks without break. Not just flying missions, but planning operations, briefing younger pilots, analyzing intelligence, reports, and maintaining aircraft systems. The responsibility wasn't just for my own life, but for every pilot under my command and every soldier depending on our air support. The portfolio contained photographs from various deployments Rob with his flight crews, standing in front of aircraft in desert camouflage, receiving commendations from superior officers. But it was the faces of the younger pilots in these photos that made Marcus pause. Men and women barely out of college, looking up to Rob with obvious respect and trust. Leadership, Rob said, noticing Marcus's focus on the photographs. By 2015, I was responsible for training the next generation of fighter pilots, teaching them not just how to fly, but how to make life and death decisions under pressure, how to adapt to constantly changing technology, how to perform flawlessly when failure means people die. The weight of that responsibility settled over the office like a physical presence. Marcus tried to imagine training someone to operate multi-million-dollar aircraft in combat conditions. knowing that any weakness in their preparation could result in catastrophic failure. So when you ask if I can handle the pace and pressure of freight logistics, Rob said quietly, beginning to close the portfolio, I want you to understand that I've spent my entire adult life in situations where the stakes were considerably higher than missed delivery deadlines. As the leather portfolio closed, Marcus felt like he was watching the conclusion of a masterclass in leadership, technology, and performance under pressure. The silence in his office felt different, not uncomfortable, but heavy with the realization that he had been completely, utterly wrong about the man sitting across from him. The silence in Marcus Bradley's office stretched for what felt like an eternity. Outside, Denver's afternoon traffic hummed steadily, and the Meridian Logistics team continued their urgent conversations about shipping schedules and client demands. But inside the glass-walled office, Marcus stared at his desk where moments before he'd witnessed a career that made his own professional accomplishments seem like practice exercises. Rob carefully returned the flight records to his leather portfolio, each movement deliberate and calm. His gray eyes remained fixed on Marcus, watching as the younger man processed the complete reversal of his assumptions. The colonel had seen this expression before, on the faces of new recruits who thought they understood what military service meant until they experienced the reality. Marcus began, then stopped. His usual corporate confidence had evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he had just dismissed one of America's most experienced military aviators. As too old to coordinate freight shipments, Mr. Bradley, Rob said, his voice carrying no trace of anger or satisfaction, only professional directness. I understand that military experience doesn't always translate directly to civilian work environments, but I hope you can see that the skills I've developed rapid decision-making under pressure. It's mastering complex technology, leading teams through critical situations. These are precisely what effective operations management requires. Marcus nodded slowly, still trying to reconcile the man before him with his preconceptions. Colonel Hawkins, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions based on ... double quotes based on my age, Rob finished matter-of-factly.
Exactly.
It's not the first time, Mr. Bradley, and unfortunately it probably won't be the last.
Exactly.
But I want you to understand something important, not for my sake, but for yours and your company's. He leaned forward slightly, his posture commanding attention without seeming aggressive. You mentioned that this is a young person's industry, that you need people who can adapt quickly to new technology and work under pressure. But you're making a critical error in judgment that many companies make. Marcus found himself leaning forward as well, genuinely curious now about where this was heading. Experience isn't just about knowing how to do things, Rob continued. It's about knowing what can go wrong and how to prevent it. It's about pattern recognition that comes from decades of facing similar challenges in different contexts. Your systems crash at 2 a.m. and millions of dollars in freight movement are at risk. Do you want someone who's theoretically capable of handling the pressure? Or someone who's actually performed flawlessly under life and death pressure for 26 years? The logic was undeniable. Marcus began to see his operation differently, not as a young, dynamic environment that required fresh energy, but as a complex system that could benefit enormously from someone with Rob's depth of experience. Let me give you a specific example, Rob said, pulling out his phone and showing Marcus a news article. 3 months ago, a major logistics company lost $18 million in a single day because their system crashed during a peak shipping period. The crisis lasted 14 hours because their young, technically skilled team had never dealt with a complete system failure under maximum load. Marcus remembered reading about that incident. It had sent shockwaves through the industry. Manage system failures during combat operations, Rob continued. When navigation systems failed over enemy territory, when communications systems went down during coordinated strikes, when weather systems threatened mission success. The technology is different, but the principles of crisis management are identical. Maintain calm leadership, implement backup protocols, coordinate multiple teams, and ensure mission success despite equipment failure. As Rob spoke, Marcus began to envision how different that $18 million crisis might have been with someone like the colonel managing the response. Instead of panic and confusion, there would have been systematic problem-solving and calm leadership. You also mentioned adapting to new technology, Rob said. In the military, we don't have the luxury of gradual technology adoption. When new systems are introduced, mastery isn't optional, it's a matter of survival. I've had to learn and master new aircraft systems, weapons technologies, communication protocols, and navigation systems throughout my career, often under combat conditions. He showed Marcus another section of his portfolio training certifications in technology, proficiency records spanning decades. The F-16 I flew in 1990 was completely different from the F-16 I flew in 2020. New avionics, updated weapons systems, enhanced communications, improved radar capabilities. The basic aircraft might look the same, but virtually every system had been upgraded multiple times. Adapting to these changes wasn't just part of the job, was essential for mission success and pilot survival. Marcus realized that his own company's technology challenges, up-to-air systems, learning new logistics platforms, adapting to client requirements were incremental compared to the technological evolution Rob had navigated throughout his military career. But here's what I think you're really missing, Rob said, his tone becoming more direct. You're so focused on finding people who can keep up with your current pace that you're not considering who can help you exceed it. You're hiring for adequacy instead of excellence. Struck Marcus like a physical blow. His entire hiring philosophy had been about finding people who could meet the demands of the job, not exceed them. In the Air Force, we didn't hire pilots who could barely handle the requirements, Rob continued. We selected people who could not only meet the demands but push the boundaries of what was possible. That's how missions succeed, how teams excel, and how organizations grow. Marcus looked around his office with new eyes. His team was competent, energetic, dedicated, but were they exceptional? Were they the kind of people who could take Meridian Logistics to the next level? Or were they just keeping up with current demands? Colonel Hawkins, Marcus said slowly, I'm beginning to understand that I may have misjudged not just you, but what this company actually needs. Rob nodded approvingly. Mr. Bradley, I'm not asking you to hire me because of my military service. I'm asking you to consider what value that experience could bring to your operations. When you face your next major challenge, and every growing company faces them, do you want a team that's never been tested under real pressure, or do you want leadership that's been forged by 26 years of high-stakes decision-making? Question hung in the air as Marcus finally began to grasp the magnitude of the opportunity he had almost dismissed. This wasn't just about hiring an operations coordinator. This was about bringing proven excellence into an organization that had been settling for competence outside the office windows. The Denver skyline stretched toward the Rocky Mountains. Somewhere in that vast landscape, other companies were making the same mistake Marcus had, almost made confusing age with obsolescence. Mistaking experience for inflexibility and choosing potential over proven performance. But in this moment, Marcus Bradley was having an epiphany that would change not just his hiring practices, but his entire understanding of what leadership really meant. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Marcus Bradley's office as he sat in contemplative silence, the weight of his realization settling over him like a heavy blanket. Across from him, Colonel Robert Hawkins remained composed, his military bearing unchanged despite having just delivered what amounted to a masterclass in leadership and experience. The leather portfolio sat closed on the desk between them, its contents having fundamentally altered the trajectory of their conversation. Marcus found himself studying Rob's face, searching for signs of resentment or satisfaction, but finding only the patient professionalism of someone accustomed to teaching difficult lessons. How many times had this man faced skepticism from people who should have known better? How many opportunities had other companies missed because they couldn't see past surface assumptions? Colonel Hawkins, Marcus began, his voice carrying a humility that hadn't been there an hour earlier. I need to ask you something directly. After what just happened here, after the way I initially approached this interview, why would you still want to work for this company? Rob considered the question carefully, his gray eyes moving from Marcus to the bustling office beyond the glass walls. Young professionals hurried past with tablets and phones, their energy palpable even through the soundproofed office. He finally spoke. His voice carried the measured wisdom of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions. "Mr. Bradley, I've spent my entire career in service to something larger than myself. The mission always came first, not personal feelings or wounded pride. If Meridian Logistics can benefit from my experience, and if I can help this team achieve excellence, they might not reach otherwise. Then personal slights become irrelevant." The answer hit Marcus harder than any rebuke could have. Here was a man who had spent 26 years literally putting his life on the line for his country. And Marcus had worried about his ability to handle shipping deadlines. "But I'll be honest with you," Rob continued. "I've had this conversation in various forms with dozens of potential employers over the past 6 months. Most never get past their initial assumptions. They see my age and decide I'm not worth the risk without ever discovering what I might bring to their organization." Marcus felt a flush of shame. "How many of those companies do you think made the same mistake I almost made?" "All of them," Rob replied without hesitation. "That's why I'm still looking for work 6 months after retirement. Despite having qualifications that should make me an asset to any organization that deals with logistics, crisis management, or team leadership." The scope of systemic age discrimination in corporate America suddenly became clear to Marcus. Many experienced professionals were being passed over by companies that desperately needed their expertise. How many organizations were weakening themselves by prioritizing youth over proven capability? "I want to make this right," Marcus said suddenly, the words coming out before he had fully formed the thought. "Not just the hiring decision, but the whole approach. You've shown me that we're thinking about this position completely wrong." Raised an eyebrow, interested but cautious. "We posted this as an operations coordinator position," Marcus continued, his mind racing as he spoke. "Entry to mid-level, focused on keeping up with existing processes. But what we actually need is someone who can redesign those processes, who can prepare us for challenges we haven't even anticipated yet." He stood up and walked to his whiteboard, grabbing a marker with newfound energy. "You mentioned the company. That lost $18 million in a system crash. What if that happened to us tomorrow? Our current team has never faced anything like that. They're great at normal operations, but crisis management isn't just about technical skills, it's about leadership under pressure." Rob watched as Marcus began sketching out organizational charts and workflow diagrams, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine excitement about the possibilities. "Colonel, what if we restructured this entirely?
Ow.
What if instead of hiring you as a coordinator, we brought you in as Director of Operations Excellence? Someone whose job is specifically to identify vulnerabilities, develop crisis protocols, and elevate the entire team's performance standards." The proposal was unexpected, and Rob found himself intrigued despite his initial skepticism. What would that look like practically? Marcus turned from the whiteboard, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a solution to a problem he hadn't realized he had. "You'd have authority to review all our operational procedures, recommend improvements, and implement new protocols. When we face our next major challenge, not if, but when you'd be the person leading our response." He began pacing, his energy infectious. "But more than that, you'd be mentoring our existing team. These are smart, dedicated people, but they lack the depth of experience that only comes from facing real adversity. You could help them develop capabilities they don't even know they need yet." Rob considered this carefully. It was a far more substantial role than what he had originally applied for. But it also represented something he hadn't expected to find in the civilian world: the opportunity to serve a mission that mattered, to use his experience to genuinely improve an organization's capabilities. "There's another aspect to consider," Rob said thoughtfully. "Military experience doesn't just prepare you for crisis, it teaches you how to prevent them. Most of the disasters companies face could be avoided with proper planning, clear protocols, and systematic risk assessment." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Exactly. We're so focused on reacting to problems that we never take time to anticipate them. We need someone with the experience to see around corners, to identify potential failures before they happen, The conversation had taken on a momentum of its own. What had begun as a routine job interview had become a strategic planning session, with both men discovering possibilities neither had initially envisioned. "Mr. Bradley," Rob said finally, "if you're serious about this approach, I'd want to spend some time understanding your current operations before making any recommendations. Real change requires understanding not just what needs to be fixed, but why the current system developed the way it did." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed immediately. "Take whatever time you need. Shadow our teams, review our procedures, talk to our clients. I want you to give me a complete assessment of where we are and where we could be." As they shook hands, both men realized that what had started as a conventional interview had become something much more significant. Meeting between two generations of American professionals, each bringing something essential that the other needed. The Denver skyline glowed in the setting sun as Rob walked back to his F-150. The leather portfolio under his arm feeling somehow lighter than when he had arrived. For the first time in 6 months, he felt that familiar sense of mission purpose that had defined his military career. Tomorrow, he would begin a new kind of service, helping a civilian organization achieve the kind of excellence he had always demanded from himself and his teams. Behind him, Rikasi Bradley stood at his office window, watching the retired colonel drive away and thinking about how close he had come to making the biggest hiring mistake of his career. The lesson was clear. In a world obsessed with youth and novelty, experience and proven performance had become undervalued commodities. Companies that recognized this truth would have a significant advantage over those that continued to confuse age with obsolescence as the sun set over the Rocky Mountains. Both men were already planning for a partnership that would prove that excellence has no expiration date. And that sometimes the best person for the job is the one with the wisdom to see beyond the immediate challenge to the greater mission that lies ahead.